Welcome to Thrive on Mission, the CRA podcast with Jim Book and Dave Jones. Jim, we're really in part two of a podcast we started last week where we're talking about the time that you spent in Salt Fork, Ohio, teaching the Leader Seminar hosted by Person to Person Ministries. And that's just been such an impactful event for me and the church here at Millwood over the years. Beautiful facility, wonderful state lodge there. I mean, it's these beautiful fireplaces, good food. It's just an incredible event. In your teaching, what was really helpful, and I think what Alex has done a great job of helping those who lead those sessions do is always stay biblical.
Yes.
And let's go to the Bible, figure out what the Bible says about church growth, because we want to grow as a church. And,
Yes.
and so we're not trying to grow for growth's sake, right?
Right. And you know this too, Dave, a lot of times, Christians, Church of Christ guys, Christian church preachers, they get a little nervous when they hear church growth because they immediately equate it with the charlatans, growth at any cost. We call pragmatic approach, whatever works, do it. So what ended up happening, the pendulum swung so far the other side. Nobody talked about church growth because it's based on superficiality, and we're not going to do that. So nobody talked about growth. Nobody suggested that we contemplate ways to grow. So we went to the other extreme where it was never mentioned. Well, we're paying the price for that now. So what we thought we would do, and this is what I love about the CRA, it's what I love about person-to-person ministries when we came together for this event, was like, okay, look, there's got to be a biblical format, a formula for real solid growth. What if we were to do a deep dive in the book of Acts and find principles and theories and formulas for it and apply it and then not apologize for it? And I think that's what we did. And I think that's why it was such a huge success. I really do.
So focusing on church growth, there's all kinds of books, resources, and those kinds of things. But to be a healthy, growing church, you really need healthy, growing leadership within the church, right?
Yes.
And so when you travel around, visit different churches, even in your own experience at Winter Park and then Kissimmee, what were some of the keys that helped you develop as a leader, and maybe that you're seeing others tap into as they develop as leaders?
So I think the dynamics have changed over the years as I travel and as I look at my own ministry over, a 30-year span in Orlando, working with two churches. This is what I think worked for our church. And I call it the sphere sovereignty concept. And that is, everybody needs to understand what their role is, what their office is, and they ought to celebrate that office. So I saw myself as the lead evangelist. And I also saw it as the one of, not the most important, but one of the most significant roles in the entire church. I also saw the elders as an office sanctioned by the scriptures. It is one of the, not the most, and I think this is where people get off, that's the most important office of the church. No, it's not. It's not. It is an important office in the church. It is essential for a strong church, but it's no more important than the evangelist. Because if you have a strong evangelist and a weak eldership, you have a weak church. You have strong shepherds and a weak preacher, you have a weak church. It's like telling me your arm is more important than your leg. Okay, which one do you want to do without? Or breathing in is more important than breathing out. Okay, which one do you want to do without? You have to have them both, but you have to understand the sphere in which they work in. So I always saw my job, Dave, based on scripture, as the evangelist was the preacher. He's the face of the church. He advocates for the leadership. He's the one that's teaching primarily the gospel. He's the point of contact. The shepherds, though, shepherd who? Not necessarily evangelist. Not that I didn't need shepherding, and I did, trust me. But
you need all kinds of help.
I do, but it's going to take more than an elder. It's going to take a psychotherapist and a psychologist. All right. But I appreciate my counselor. Really, he's great. He lets me get depressed at my own speed. So I love him. Anyway. So, but I needed the shepherds to know, look, you need to watch over me, but primarily it's the sheep. They're the ones that need you. But let's do it. Let's understand our role. Let's appreciate our role, and let's exercise our role to the maximum. But if we do that and we respect each other's role, I'll tell you, this church will flourish. And they did.
Good.
They did.
Dean Mills, I believe it was Dean Mills, talks about what he called a collegial church leadership. And it's the elders and evangelists working together to lead the church. A lot of
Yes.
times, and it's probably a misnomer, that term, an elder-led church. And then the evangelist, in some cases, becomes a hireling and does
Yeah.
whatever they tell him to do. But they really have to work together. They have different roles and different responsibilities. And just as a help for that, by the way, I might encourage guys to read Jason Cole's book on biblical church leadership. I think he
Yes.
outlines
Yes.
that pretty well there, and that would be a very, very effective tool. So besides the polity of
Oh,
the
and Dave,
church,
can we
yeah,
just say
yeah,
that shout out? Okay, because we always like to do these like spur of the moment shout outs. Jason Cole, you talk about, okay, if you want an example of how an evangelist works really well with his elders, there's a teammanship, there's camaraderie, there's great growth, great vision, but they respect each other's roles so well.
yeah,
That's an example, Lake Mount Church
it
and
really is. It
Ohio.
really is.
Like great camaraderie, how they just work together really, really well.
That,
So I know when I got into the local church, I was 29 when I first took First Christian Winter Park. The elders, Roger Chambers was an elder at that church, Dr. Roger Chambers, who is revered and respected in our brotherhood. He had since passed away and so I came in that church about 5 years after he had passed away, but his influence was still very much a part of that church. And, he really helped develop the eldership into a strong, biblically sound team. I mean, they were a very strong team. And the problem that Winter Park had was over a 10-year period of time, they had 5 preachers, literally 10 years, 5. So 2 in and out, 2 in and out. Now, and there are a host of reasons why. And I mean, I remember to this day, one of the most godly saints in that church came by my office because I was getting ready to segue out of Florida Christian College. I was the director of recruitment for 7 years, and I loved that job, into the church at Winter Park. It was my first preaching ministry. She came by my office. She said, "Look, you got a great thing going at this college. You ought to stay here. You do not want to step into the mess you're going to get into Winter Park." But I saw the potential, and I was like, you know what? That meant a lot, but I think God's help, we can get this thing going. One of the things that I think helped me is creating confidence with the elders that, guys, I'm here for the long run, and I really think we can apply some real principles into church growth. If you'll let me be the evangelist that I can be, you'll let me allow my personality and my vision. I promise you, I will work with you. You will know what's going on. You will be a part of it, but will you let me cast the vision? I've been through training. I've been through 4 years of great education. I've learned from the best. Not that you guys don't love the Lord, but I set myself apart for this. I went to school to study to build a church. And they're like, "Jim, go." And I'm telling you, we
great.
had the tightest relationship, but I had to earn their respect, but I also they had to give me the enough chain to run. And they did. And then when I went to Kissimmee, it's the same thing. Now, Dave, I was asked by my elders at Kissimmee, like I'd been there about a month. They said to me, "Would you like to be an elder?" And I said, "Why?" "Well, because we want to offer you the opportunity." I said, "Gentlemen, I don't need to be. I love what I do. I love being an evangelist. To me, this is such a great office. It is a powerful office. It has tremendous influence. You all have a great office. You have tremendous influence. And I really believe there needs to be a check and balance. I really can't be one of you." I've been asked a million times, is it wrong for a preacher or the evangelist to be an elder? I don't know that it's unscriptural, but I think you would want to work yourself out of that. I would think you'd want to build yourself such a great team where you don't have to be. I mean, if I were a head coach, I don't know that I'd want to be calling the offensive signals. I don't know that I could manage the whole game and still call the signals.
Hey, it didn't work for Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes, that's for sure.
Right. So hire smart,
Yeah.
compartmentalize well, and you don't have to do that. Now that's my take. And that if you're asking me how do we succeed, that's how we did it. It worked beautifully.
Yeah, that's good. I came into the ministry in my 30s, and I created a college in my car. And so I had a boatload of Roger Chambers cassette tapes, George Fall's Eternal Struggle on cassette. These are, We're talking a long time ago, man. It wasn't
But
eight
you
track.
learned
It
from
was
one of the best, man.
yeah, but I had a college in my car, and that's how I was developing early on my understanding of the church. I think Roger had a unique understanding of the nature of the church and the restoration movement in our culture. And then, of course, George theologically offers so much in the understanding of Scripture. Dickie Chambers, I would call person to person, and they would send me cassette tapes of all my favorite preachers. Every revival I could go to, I went to. Every seminar I went to. And I just knew that if I wanted to be, and this isn't to boast about the process I went through, but rather it's to boast about the men that spoke into my lives. And Roger died before I even graduated high school. And
Right.
I never had the chance to know him personally. I never knew Dean Mills personally, Don DeWelt. These are guys that were gone before I was even a Christian. And so I was able to learn from them. And I think that spoke well into my ministry moving forward and helped me understand how to lead and to be doctrinally sound in the course of that and working with a stable eldership there. So I'm really grateful for what you had to say about the importance of working alongside of an eldership and giving each other room to do the job that God's given us to do.
Absolutely. And if I could just encourage elders who may be listening to this podcast, man, love your preacher and treat him like he is part of the team. His role's different, but your team is only going to be as good as he is. An evangelist, man, get to know your elders, love on them. I'll tell you something we did, Dave. This is a personal story, and I wouldn't advocate you do this because it, it just worked for us. But when I was at Winter Park, my elders would, not all of them, the smart ones didn't do this, but I had 2 or 3 who would meet me every morning for coffee at AM. And we would meet at Starbucks and we would get there as they were opening and we would talk about the day. Our first service was at 8:30. Second service was at 10:30. Third service was at 11:30. And then we had the evening programs, but we would talk about the day and how exciting. I think we got a baptism at second service. And yeah, we were just like, we were high five. We would then go. Sometimes we never went home because we had a huge downtown ministry that we did we had the college age ministry from UCF and Full Sail meet on campus for dinner. And then we had Doc Smith preaching on Sunday night. I mean, we had the team. And so about 9:30 or 9:00, people would start working their way home and closing the campus down. And get this, those same elders on our way home, because we passed that same Starbucks, we would stop and celebrate everything that happened over the last 12 hours. Now, that's insane. I'm not sure I would encourage that kind of teammanship, but we built that. We were so close. It was insane. But that's the kind of respect and love we had for each other. And I mean, we talk to this day, like almost not every day, but weekly, my old elders from the past. And one of my old elders was just with us just hanging out with us. He came and spent the weekend with us from my days at Winter Park. But I would just say one thing we decided was, look, let's love each other. Let's disagree where we can without being disagreeable. We had times, man, I'm telling you, Dave, I mean, there were times where we left angry with each other because we're on different pay, but we knew this church is going to suffer if we don't get our act together. And we made up and we kept going. But I tell you, for all the preachers out there that says you can't have a good relationship with the elders, I say you can, but it has to be intentional. And you have to love each other and respect each other, and you have to admire each other, and you have to allow yourselves to disagree. And I can imagine work with me. I used to tell people the world would want to work. I'm insane. I could not work with me. I would say put him in a home. So I'm like, if you can work with me, you can work with anybody. But I will tell you, I was blessed. But we had to be intentional about it, and we had to respect each other, and we
You've
had
got
to
to be.
listen to each other.
My we've shared before the transition of me into ministry here. And what I found is because I was a young guy, they'd served alongside Gene for years. It took some time to build some trust between us. And
Yes.
so we did some very intentional things along the way that tried to foster that relationship. We'd go to Cleveland Indians games together, Columbus Clippers minor league baseball. We'd share meals together, and all of those things are very important. And what I found is over the years we developed more and more trust with one another.
Yes.
But what really developed the trust amongst us, uh, unfortunately, but maybe fortunately, were the crisis situations in the church
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we had to be in the trenches together, where maybe we were under attack together, dealing with a very serious issue together. And every time we came out of those things like a band of brothers.
Yes.
When we knew, there were times, there were two men that I could trust, and it was the two elders I had at the time. There was a time in a sermon, and I just really ranted and raved on a particular issue. And we had one family that was very offended by that. And they came to the elders, and they were very unhappy with me. And this is early on in my ministry. And the elders privately had told me that the way I handled it was wrong, but what I said was right on track. And that's what they communicated to that family. And that just taught me these guys have my back. And that
Yes.
meant the world to me as a young preacher, knowing that I wasn't perfect and I was making a lot of mistakes along the way. To have men like that supporting me meant the world to me.
If they had not done that, let's just play it differently. They felt politically that you could be, throw you under the truck just to save face. Is it possible you'd still be at this church?
My guess is it would have, I would have felt like the dog with his tail between the legs, and would have been working on an exit strategy very quickly
Probably so.
if these guys didn't have my back. And my hope is I always had their backs as well along that way.
So, being with the CRA as the associate director, I didn't necessarily know that conflict resolution was going to be part of my job, but it's fast becoming that. We have an eldership and a preacher. One elder's going sideways because of a bad influence from a family member, which now is affecting all the elders. And it does. It's like slamming your finger in the door and go, well, it's only my finger that hurts. Your whole body's pounding. So now you got the preacher who's like, you know what? I got it. Now we got to work through this issue with all the elders, but it's not just the elders. It's a disgruntled family member who's influencing the elders by extension. And it all goes back to what we said. How effective is that church going to be with consternation amongst the leadership? And, growing up as a kid, I always knew that nothing could possibly go wrong in my life as long as I knew my mom and dad loved each other. My brother and sister, I could be fighting like cats and dogs, but I knew as long as my mom and dad weren't fighting, our family's good. I look at a church and I'm like, your church is going to feel it. If they sense hatred, dissension in the leadership, it's going to trickle into the body. The water's going to get poisoned, and the growth of your church is going to be severely challenged. So I am a huge believer. Look, preacher, evangelist, elders, staff, my goodness, get it together, or it will diametrically challenge the growth and development of your church.
There are really well-intentioned preachers that have an idea of what it takes to help their church thrive. And if they could just put in place some of their vision in the church, then the church would definitely hit that, as Mission 120 says, 20 people, or
Yeah.
baptize 120 people in the next
Yeah,
4 years.
yeah,
But
right.
unfortunately, maybe they're working with an eldership that's just become complacent, or even resisting any sort of change. And some of what you described there describes their situation. What would you say to those preachers that are in that situation where they're just not on the same page with the elders, but they really want to be, to push forward and help them? What would you say that is?
So when I was at Winter Park, I had all these dreams, and I was like every elders meeting, we were going to take Greenland and Denmark. Okay. So it's like, I had one time I had an elder pull me off to the side, and he became my best friend. In fact, he's such a good friend. This is so weird. I was speaking in Bowling Green, Ohio last week, and I decided I was going to drive 12 hours home. I was like, I just got to get home. So, he calls me at 12 o'clock and he goes, hey, are you driving home? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, I think I'm going to sit up and talk to you so you don't fall asleep. I'm like, you're crazy. Go back to bed. I mean, I had an elder, one of my old elders called me and try to talk, keep me talking so I don't fall asleep. Right. But that's the same elder that pulled me off to the side, my early years of ministry. And he said, I got to tell you something. He goes, I appreciate your vision, Jim. I love what you're doing. The people are excited. We're having growth. But he said, your problem, Jim, is this. You come into an elders meeting with this plan and you're already pre-developing it. You've already got it in motion. We're just now hearing about it. It's not that we don't want to get excited. It's not that we don't want to join you. It's not that we don't want to applaud you. But he said, sometimes, Jim, he goes, I feel like I'm at the ocean and I'm standing at the shore and I'm looking out and you're 190 feet into the water. And you're like, come on, guys. And you didn't even give us a chance to get there. So I said, okay, I will do a better job of communicating with you through the process. And instead of catching you up with where I am, because I'm just not used to doing that, but I will, because I want you on my team. And the last thing I want to do is try to drive this church somewhere and you guys not be with me, or you would have been with me had you known more. Shame on me. So from that day forward, I started meeting them for lunch, like during the week. So we didn't have to wait for the elders meeting to roll. I was like, guys, I got a great idea. What are you doing for lunch? Blah, 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 blah. All right, let's talk more about it when we get to the elders meeting, but thank you. All right. So a lot of guys, the elders aren't on board. It's not because the elders hate the preacher or think the idea is bad. They just hate catching it on the fly or having the church talk about it and they catch it, secondhand. Now, there are those.
Hey, real quick, let me insert something there. I had one of our elders tell me, could we just go 1 month without some major change? And that's what they felt like. The waves were hitting them and they're like, how to process this.
There is the story of the preacher who's been hired and they tell him, we want you to grow this church. And he says, okay. And he comes in and every idea gets hammered. And no matter what he does, because the elders, don't want to lose control, or in fact, this is going to cost money, or maybe everybody's going to have to work a little harder to get to the next level. At some point, that guy's got to realize if I'm just going to beat my head against the wall, I need to go to a church that will appreciate the vision, that wants to grow. And I always hate saying, hey, leave that church, man, get out of there. But I mean, there are, you will have the 10 spies at an elders meeting that will tell you over and over, we can't. And at some point, you got to cut your losses and go. And
then there are guys that, number one, maybe don't know how to pick their battles.
Right.
And they feel like every conversation's a fight and you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful of that. And second, what I discovered is some of my early on ideas, such as small groups, didn't come to fruition for about 10 to 15 years into my ministry. And it took time and growth and understanding about why we needed those things. And so there were ideas that I had that I sort of just put on my bulletin board. And then I thought, we'll bring that up at a more appropriate time. And when the context shifts, when things are a little bit different. And then maybe the third thing that I would add to this conversation here is understand the power of influence. If you've ever read John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Yes.
One of the key laws of leadership is that leadership is influence. And so understanding that maybe, as you talked about, it's not so much convincing the group in an elders meeting, but maybe talking to the right person offline and letting them set the tone and fight your battle for you.
I got a phone call from a preacher on Thanksgiving Day. I was like, I'm not answering this. Like, I better. And he was like in tears, Jim, pray for us. Our church is getting ready to implode. We have an associate. It's just being cantankerous. Eldership there's consternation in eldership. So I said, okay. So we talked for like 30 minutes and we prayed with him. And I said, okay, we're going to coach you. We're going to be praying. Over time, things begin to heal. The associate ended up moving on. The eldership became more galvanized around him and the church. Healing started taking place. Meanwhile, he was throwing some resumes out. And I said, okay, let me ask you a question. I said, if you leave the church you're in right now, you're going to start all over. Yes. I said, you realize that there's a Karen at that other church, probably more than one. And I said, you're probably going to have an elder that's going to go sideways pretty quick with you there. I said, but right now you're at a church, you've experienced great growth since you've been there. The people love you. For the majority of the time, you've had a good experience. What if we prayed hard about writing it out, giving you the toughness, and seeing what could happen if you got over this hill? Because you're already thinking about parachuting out of the plane. What if we were to grab the stick and see if we could land it besides crashing it? Because you might still be able to salvage this thing. With the Lord's help, they came through it. The elder that was causing the problem has kind of moved on. The associate, he's left. They've had baptism since then, and there's been healing. And so let me just, my point to the preacher that feels like pulling the ripcords, the only option I have. No, it's not. It's writing it out, loving your people through it, uh, uh, developing a little tenure, which would help, and saying, you know what, the grass may be greener over there, but I will tell you this: the grass is always greener over the septic tank, man. So just think twice about before you leave. Okay, maybe this is where you got to stay. Maybe God's trying to develop you right
Yeah.
here.
Jim, your context and my context are very different. Our congregation's a smaller, very rural church. You spent most of your ministry in large cities, large city close to Orlando there. In fact, I remember the first time I went to Kissimmee, it was for the Florida Bible Conference years ago now. And I'd heard about Kissimmee and I'd heard about Jim Book, and I was excited to go there for the first time. And I remember walking up to the door, and posted on the door of your church building was a restraining order against one of the guys. And
That's what you want at the door.
and I'm like, whoa, what's going on
Oh my
here?
God, what
I'm
kind of
I'm
church?
just glad my name wasn't on it,
I know you
and
were not
I
on
was
it.
reassured to learn your
And
name
my
wasn't
name
on it.
wasn't on
So,
it.
yeah, that's
Oh,
important. So, regardless of the context we come from, big or small, city or rural, what are some key principles that a preacher in particular can carry out of this podcast to help them really build that connection within the leadership team of their church?
a couple things. They're not your enemy. Those guys are your friends. um, and respect them. Number two, remind them frequently that, yeah, they ultimately the decision is theirs. I mean, as the elders in the church, it's not the most important office, but it's the highest office, and the buck does stop with them. Number three, I used to always remind myself, Jim, you're not going to gain any ground with these guys if you're constantly fighting with them. Okay. I don't know where you think you're going to go in this ministry if you're always a burr in their saddle. So it's your job to go out of your way to make sure they know you love them. Number four, when you stand up in the church and you talk about victories, always remind them, hey, folks, your elders were a part of a great decision. Include them in, and I would include them by name, not always but I would pinpoint an elder in particular during a sermon and remind the church how blessed they are to have this guy.
It's a great
Um,
point.
and,
That's good.
and, and, and I'll tell you, there's not an eldership in the world that wants to go through a preacher search.
Yeah.
Trust me, they hate it. They
Can't
hate
imagine.
it. So they're going to
That's
do
good.
everything they can to keep you because they hate preacher searches. And so if we all understand that, you know what, we really are better off together than we are apart. And can we not work through this? And like you said, Dave, so beautifully, look at hills and go, that's one to die on. You know what? That's not even one to consider. Move on. Those are simple tools, but they work.
Yeah.
They work.
Love it. I love that idea of giving honor where honor's due, not for flattery's sake, not to get
No.
the elders on your side, but to help the church understand their role and the importance in the kingdom. It's a good job that they've undertaken to do, and they need to be. They're going to be held accountable for it, of course, in the end by Jesus, and we need
Yeah.
to encourage them to the best of our ability and make their
Yeah.
work a joy and not a difficulty.
Well, the Bible does command us make their jobs as joyful as possible. I'll tell you what else it does. It sends a clear message to the church. Don't try to pit the preacher against the elders or the elders. These guys
That's
actually
good.
love each other.
That's
Okay.
good.
So don't
Really
bother
good.
pitting them because they're already unified. They're a team.
That's great. And Jim, a couple points of encouragement for any of the elders that might be listening to us today.
First of all, if you're asked to be an elder, consider that the greatest offer you will ever be given because you're asked to lead the institution that God sent his son and died for. I'm sorry, there's no organization in the world more important. Number two, if you decide to be an elder, take it as serious as you possibly can because it is the greatest office in the world. It is. It is. And and love God and love those people. Love them and and do your best to build that relationship with the church staff. Don't become us and them, become one and unified. I will say this, Dave, I've talked to a lot of churches like, Jim, we can't get guys to take on the role. And so I've developed this brand new leadership development program. And part of that program is inspiring men to want to begin considering it and taking it as an opportunity to do something great. Leave that I can't think of any greater opportunity for a man to be asked to be an elder, but don't
Love it.
run from it. and entertain it, at least entertain it.
You were in ministry for 30 years between Winter Park and Kissimmee. Always have an eldership? Things always in good relationship with those elders?
We never had a problem. Can you imagine working with me? And an elder not going out of a meeting with his head exploding or wanting to like shoot
Jim, I've been to Starbucks with you a million times. My head explodes every time you place an order. I still don't understand what you drink at Starbucks.
Exactly. So if anybody says you're an elder and you work with Jim Book, that person's automatically going to heaven. That poor guy. So we had phenomenal experiences, both sets of elders. I could not have enjoyed them more. Dave, I got to say this. I was very proud of guys like you because Salt Fork, in my mind, it was leadership training, but I was thinking heavy on preachers, maybe elders. But like you, I mean, you had your guys with you, and a lot of the preachers had their elders with them. There were a couple of churches where I think the preacher couldn't make it, but the elders from the church went. So it was really great to see a balance between evangelist, the preacher, and his elders.
It's always helpful to go to those kinds of events with elders and deacons and other key men so that I'm not coming back and saying, oh, you should have been there.
Oh, absolutely.
We can come back together and we just start running when we come back from those kinds of events. It's always helpful.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember going on retreats with our elders. We would go to a resort and just flush stuff out. And those meetings were long. They were cumbersome. Sometimes your head was going to explode, but I knew we needed it. We needed to be together. We needed to dream together, pray together, laugh together, cry together. We couldn't do it separately. I mean, I was blessed, but we had to work at it though, Dave, and we had to be very intentional. It didn't happen by accident. Or, we really had to be conscious about that.
Our vision statement at Millwood is to love like Jesus and to live like family. Families have to discover and work through issues.
Yes.
And the family that doesn't becomes a dysfunctional family.
Correct.
And a leadership in a church that doesn't work through those issues, they become dysfunctional, and that does nobody any good, right?
No. And I just think leaving has become too easy. Well, we're leaving or I'm stepping down. Okay, hold on. Before you step down and leave, what if we were to work through this and pray through this and love each other through this? Why is exiting always the easy option and the only option? It shouldn't be. Like you said, Dave, we're a family. Families work it out. This is a church family. How about if we do something crazy, love each other through it?